Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cherries On Top podcast after what has been a very pleasant week in the life of a Bournemouth fan. A tremendous 2-0 victory on the opening weekend against Aston Villa and the arrivals of Marcos Cenessi and Neto to the club have all helped lift the spirits. But before we delve into that and take a look ahead into the daunting task in front of Scott Parker's men this weekend, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the Manchester football reporter at The Athletic, Dan Sheldon. Dan, a very warm welcome and thank you very much for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me. The pleasure's mine.
Thank you. Let's get straight into it then. So looking back at the opening weekend, both teams actually got off to a very fruitful start, each recording 2-0 victories. What did you make of each team's performance in the opening weekend?
I thought for Bournemouth, we start with Bournemouth, I was pleasantly surprised. Aston Villa had made a lot of positive noises over the summer, got their business done early, signed some big players, and you'd kind of thought they'd carry that momentum into the start of the new season. But then going back to the beginning of the previous campaign, I think they played a newly promoted side that day as well, and they lost. And I guess it's that thing on the first day of the campaign, newly promoted sides want to kind of make their mark and pull off a surprise. And Bournemouth caught Villa napping, but yeah, as I say, pleasantly surprised because I wasn't expecting that from Bournemouth, and Scott Parker did a really good job there.
Yeah, and as for City against West Ham, another very imposing performance, you could say.
Yeah, it was mouth-watering, wasn't it? Let's be honest. They absolutely dominated West Ham, a team many are tipping for Europa League qualification, maybe a push at fourth. City were phenomenal, and they just look like a scary prospect when you've got Kevin De Bruyne and Erling Haaland linking up it.
Yeah,
I'm very worried if I was any other team.
It is very, very scary. But Pep Guardiola has said Manchester City are habitually slow starters, but they just blew West Ham out of the water. So do you think it's ominous signs for the rest of the competition? And realistically, what do you think of the outcomes for City could be this season?
Well, I think it's way too early to say they're going to run away with the title. I think last season they won it by a point, and they did so without a striker. This season they've got one of the best strikers in world football, and he's already shown what he's capable of against a very good West Ham team. So are they favourites to win the league? Absolutely. Should they be favourites? Absolutely. But there's 37 games to go. I don't think Pep would be getting carried away by a convincing 2-0 win over West Ham. And, we can all be excited by the prospect of what City could do this season because, could they get 100 points again? Maybe. They've won the league without a striker, and now they have, as I say, one of the best in the world. So, yeah, it's frightening in that regard. And they were just so dominant, and they're going to do that to a lot of teams this season. They played, as you say, they played West Ham off the pitch. David Moyes, I think, after the game admitted that there's just no answer to what City will do. They will just pass it, and they just pull teams apart. West Ham won't be the first team. They won't be the last team. Yeah, it's going to be a long season for teams that are coming up against City, bar maybe Liverpool, who might give them a good game.
Yeah, and as you alluded to, they won the title last season by 1 point, but Liverpool have already dropped points to a fellow promoted side, Fulham. Do you think that's already could be a crucial slip up? And do you think that's a result that Pep Guardiola might use to keep the City players motivated to not do that against Bournemouth this weekend?
No, not at all. I think, we may look back at the end of the season and, Liverpool, if City have won the league by 2 points, then you might look at that opening game of the season where Liverpool dropped points. But it's way, way, way too early to think that Fulham result will have any impact on the title race. Man City will drop points this season. I'm saying that now. I may be proved wrong. You mean clip this up? They go unbeaten and win all 38 games, but they're bound to drop points at some point in this season. And we'll be saying the same thing. Oh, will Liverpool take advantage, etc., etc. So no, I don't think they will be paying any attention to Liverpool not beating Fulham on the opening day of the season.
Yeah, of course. And Bournemouth will be reunited with arguably one of their best ever players, Nathan Ake, this weekend. And when he first joined City, he wasn't getting the game time that he probably would have wanted. But towards the back end of last season, he started getting a bit more regular game time at left back. But opening weekend, he started at centre back. Do you think that this could be a turning point in his Man City career?
Yeah, I absolutely. I don't see why not. I think it's no secret that City were trying to sign a left back, but all the while they were doing that, Pep was always saying that he has got Nathan who can play there. And as you said, he had played there, and at the weekend he played as a central defender. So I think for Nathan, there was a lot of talk of him possibly going to Chelsea, and you'd imagine or you'd expect one of the conversations he would have been having with Pep was game time, because this is a £40 million player who, as you say, did very well at Bournemouth. Went to City. He probably knew he wasn't going to be starting week in, week out, because bench is already so good. But with the opportunity coming up to leave this summer, and him staying, you would expect conversations to have been centered on, well, will I play more often this season? And if we've possibly seen evidence of that already, as you say, starting against West Ham in the centre of defence. So it looks good for him. But then if City go and sign another left back, which they still want to add another fullback, whether they do or not, I'm not sure. But then it may limit Nathan's game time. But for now, I'm sure he's pretty satisfied with the performance against West Ham. It was a clean sheet. And B, I'm sure he's looking forward to playing Bournemouth if he's going to start, because they did wonders for his career, really. He was kind of going nowhere at Chelsea, went to Bournemouth, and as I say, Bournemouth done very well out of that deal. Got £40 million for a player. So I think he's looking. I'd say he's probably looking forward to a reunion.
And as you were saying, he was being linked with a move back to Chelsea this summer. And while City have recruited quite well this summer, they've also debulked their squad quite a bit. And the likes of Raheem Sterling, Gabriel Jesus, Alexander Zinchenko have all been sold to certainly top four rivals, but potential Premier League rivals, title rivals as well. So to me, that signals Manchester City's confidence and arrogance slightly about how strong their current squad is. Do you think that is the case, or have City had to sell some of their assets to look to strengthen again this season? And are they a stronger or weaker side now?
No, I think first of all, I think you have to give enormous credit to Man City. If you look at the summer window at the moment, a lot of clubs have a lot of players that they're struggling to sell. Man City have done phenomenally well at selling players and getting good money for players. And I think, would they have kept hold of Sterling? Sure. Did he want more game time? Absolutely. And Chelsea came with a decent financial package to Man City. And ultimately, just look at City's squad. I mean, just based on that one game, may they miss Sterling in 3 months' time? Possibly.
Yeah.
But just based on the evidence of what we saw against West Ham, no one is saying, oh, Man City look a worse team without Sterling.
Of course.
So, no, I wouldn't necessarily say it's an arrogance thing selling to these top sides either. I think it's come to the point now in the Premier League, and certainly with European leagues, where there are only a select few clubs who can afford these players and afford to pay them the salaries that they're already on. Man City are one of those clubs, PSG maybe another, and probably Chelsea, among other clubs in England, Man United, Liverpool, because of how much money the Premier League generates. And, those clubs are so far ahead of, look at Barcelona. We're all marveling how Barcelona can afford these players. So it makes financial sense for Man City to sell to clubs that can afford them. And they happen to be in England. So, you're not going to see Bournemouth trying to compete to sign Raheem Sterling because they haven't got the money. Well, Chelsea have. So I think that makes sense for them to be selling. I think Danny Taylor did a great piece on The Athletic about this, where maybe the big six just have to start selling to each other because no one else can afford the players.
Yeah.
That rings true in this scenario too. Yeah.
And going into the season, obviously loads of people were touting Bournemouth to go down. Many still are, despite the result this weekend. And even the Cherries fans were a bit topsy-turvy about whether they do well. So they're going up against Man City, who are a completely different animal to Aston Villa. Let's get that clear right away. Do you think that Man City currently are the best squad in the world?
Well, they didn't win the Champions League. Real Madrid won the Champions League, and I know that comes down to moments, but ultimately City crumbled in that second semi-final with the best squad in the world crumble. I'm being facetious, really. Of course, just look at their squad; it's phenomenal. You look at their manager, phenomenal. On paper, they are. For me, they are.
Yeah.
Adding Erling Haaland is just, as I say, it's just ridiculous.
It still makes me laugh to this.
Yeah, you can't quite comprehend, how good that team were anyway. And then they add him. They reached the Champions League semi-final, came close to reaching the final without a striker. So on paper, I'd probably have to say, they are probably pound for pound the best team in the world. But that Champions League trophy still eludes them. And I think, as it was for Chelsea when they had all their riches under Roman Abramovich, that Champions League trophy eluded them for years. And then eventually they got it. And, it will happen for City. Maybe it happens this season. And I think that would certainly cement their status as, certainly the number one team around.
That being said, then, could you yourself identify any areas of weakness or potential areas that Bournemouth could look to exploit this Saturday, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would have to pinpoint the left back. I think ultimately it's going to be difficult, but Man City aren't blessed with numbers in that department, and they're having to kind of make do and shuffle a few players around. So if you're Bournemouth, you're going to target those areas, but then equally, Bournemouth aren't going to see a lot of the ball. So it's Bournemouth are going to have to either just soak it up and sit back and wait to hit on the counter, or they're going to have to go, press, be aggressive, and try and close City down. I mean, if they do that, then you kind of worry what will happen, because City will just run rings around.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's going to be a very, very, very long afternoon for Bournemouth. They're going to be out of possession. The sun's going to be shining.
Yeah.
It's going to be hot. They're going to be running, chasing shadows. The key for Bournemouth will be just when they get the ball, and if they do create chances, they just have to be clinical, because you don't get many chances against Man City, and they will get a lot of chances against you. So the key is, I mean, I would be looking at the left back situation, trying to exploit that. But ultimately, it will come down to they just have to take their one or two chances that might come their way.
And speaking of clinical, now on to the star man, Mr. Inevitable himself, Erling Haaland. People were questioning him after his debut against Liverpool in the Community Shield, wondering how long it would take him to settle in. But with Bournemouth's potential back five and a low block, how do you think he's going to be looking to exploit this weak Cherries defence compared to the other defences that he's already faced in the world?
Well, the thing for Erling is it's not just him that's going to be exploiting it. He will put himself in positions to score. We saw that against West Ham. He will just be there. The worry I'd have for Bournemouth, and I think this was a point made on commentary at the weekend, is if it's Bernardo Silva, for example, looking up and the ball's at his feet, he's looking up and he's seeing Kevin De Bruyne, he's seeing Haaland, he's seeing Foden, he's seeing Jack Grealish, all running. And if you're the Bournemouth defence, you're seeing all those players running at you.
When
and it's like you double up on Haaland and leave Grealish free, or vice versa. So that's going to be a humongous issue for not just Bournemouth, so many teams this season. And with Haaland, I just think we've seen evidence of him doing it at Borussia Dortmund. He just doesn't need. He needs half an eye on the goal, and that's all it will take. He will just, he hits it with such venom, such power, and such precision that he's just one of those players, I think, that is almost impossible to defend against, because if you defend against him and you mark him out of the game, you're letting other players come free, and then eventually you're going to have to leave Haaland to go and close down the other players. Well, guess what? He's now alone in the box. So these are I'm not paid to be a Premier League manager, but I imagine this is what Scott Parker is probably trying to weigh up in his head at the moment.
It is scary times, and you led perfectly into the next question. I was going to ask you, if you were Scott Parker, how do you keep this goal scoring machine at bay other than just praying?
Just put all players on the goal line.
Could be the new tactic with this side. It's actually scary.
Flood the goal line.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, Bournemouth are going to have to rely on the goalkeeper having a really good game, the defence being organised, clever in possession. When they get the ball, they can't afford just to give it straight back to Man City, because it will just be 90 minutes of non-stop wave after wave of attack.
Yeah.
So Scott Park, I mean, I've not watched Bournemouth too closely, but I'd imagine he's going to have to get them well drilled in being organised, out of possession, but also maximising it when they do have the ball. Because as we've seen, City are so good at recovering it. So it will depend on, if they can stay calm, if they can at times try and take this thing out of the game. City will get tired too. As I say, it's going to be boiling hot. So, we're only the second game into the season. Players quite aren't up to fitness yet. So that, I think, Scott could be looking at. But as I say, it will just be staying organised, resolute, aware of what's going on, defending for your lives, and just being with the ball, when you have possession, just being careful with it. Don't give it straight back and allow yourself to sit back and defend again.
Yeah, of course. And talking about strikers, prior to Haaland, Manchester City were struggling to find a number 9 since the prime Aguero. But someone who was dropping Aguero numbers in the Championship for the past 2 seasons, Dom Solanke of Bournemouth. He scored 30 goals in 45 games last season, and he was played in a slightly different role down the left. How important is it for a lower side in the division to have that talisman that can score the goals? Obviously, they've got Dom Solanke, and Kiefer Moore played striker last weekend and scored, and everything he seems to touch turns to goals at the moment. So how important is it that having that talisman, especially down there as well?
Yeah, it's crucial. I think crucial for Solanke will be, he struggled in the Premier League. He struggled to score goals in the Premier League. I think we saw that. We see that every other season with Alexander Mitrovic at Fulham. He would go down to the Championship, and I think he scored 40 plus goals last season to help them get promoted. Okay, he hit the ground running against Liverpool and put in a really good performance, Mitrovic. So the key for Solanke will be, yes, it's great scoring goals in the Championship, but if Bournemouth are to stay up this season, you would expect they are going to need one of their strikers, whether it's Solanke or Kiefer Moore, to kind of get that 15 to 20 goals, because that's what they're going to need. So yes, it's great that they were brilliant in the Championship and Solanke scored plenty of goals, but it counts for nothing if he ends up with 4 come the end of this season, because there's a good chance Bournemouth may go down again if that's the case.
And that being said, then Solanke at the moment was played down the left. Do you think that will affect him in sense of losing the rhythm in front of goal and then potentially losing confidence that you obviously need as a striker to score the goals? Do you think playing off the left could be a bit of an issue should Scott Parker decide to keep using that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know Dom Solanke. I don't know what his thoughts are, and I'm not privy to the conversations that Scott's had. But potentially for that Aston Villa game, there was something tactical in it where Scott thought you'd be better off playing off the left here, and we'll go with Kiefer down the middle. And ultimately, the result, paid credence to the fact that Scott must have been right in that regard. Will Solanke, as an out and out striker, will he like playing off left week in, week out? I mean, if I was an out and out striker, probably not. You get a little bit frustrated, but it's one of those things. If you're winning, you can't really moan about it, because ultimately you're still getting the 3 points, which is what you're there for at the end of the day. But you'd imagine Solanke coming off the back of last season where he was impressive. He had that, he had the momentum, he had the rhythm. If he's on the left for, the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, then you do kind of lose that momentum and that rhythm playing up front. And then you get into that kind of vicious cycle of, well, is he a striker? Is he a left winger? And sure, that's the last thing that he wants.
Yeah, of course. And now moving on the Cherries on Top podcast, I like to have a little playful game to get the fans thinking as well. So this week, the question for you, Dan, is if you had to take a Bournemouth player from each position, defence, midfield and attack, to try and incorporate into this impenetrable Man City side, who would they be and why?
So can I kill 2 birds with 1 stone with defence and midfield, or is that cheating?
Yeah, you can do. Go for it.
So I think Jefferson Lerma played in the back 3, in a back 5, didn't he?
Yeah, back 5,
more adept at playing in midfield.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think he's clearly one of Bournemouth's better, more versatile players. Yeah. He's on decent money down there. International player. So would he get into the Man City team? No. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably go for him.
Yeah.
And up front, just based off last season, I think you'd have to go Solanke. He scored plenty of goals, helped Bournemouth get promoted. One player I do really like, and obviously everyone is aware of the story, and I think he's a top player, is David Brooks. And I think he's absolute top class. Obviously, he's coming back to fitness.
Yeah, so in a few weeks' time should be ready.
When he's fit and firing again, I think he gets into a lot of good teams, because he is from what we saw, a very, very good player. So hopefully he continues his recovery and comes back as soon as possible.
And speaking of that, you kind of missed out the defence a little bit. So I'll ask you a question to make up for it.
I went for Lerma. So Lerma played in midfield.
Speaking of Marcus Cenessi, he's another international player, played alongside Lionel Messi as well. What do you think of that as a signing?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting signing. There are a lot of players that have played alongside Lionel Messi that aren't quite Lionel Messi.
Exactly.
But no, I'm excited by the signing. I think it's an important signing. I think Bournemouth needed to get some players in. I think Scott spoke about that ad nauseum over the summer, that they were selling more players than they were bringing players in. And ultimately that he was probably thinking, oh, how's the season going to pan out with, a threadbare squad? Yeah. So it's an important piece of business. And, if he can hit the ground running, then that's an extremely exciting player Bournemouth have got on their hands.
Yeah. And so moving on, a few quick fire questions to round it off. Bournemouth have never beaten Man City in 17 attempts. Can this be the weekend that it changes? And what do you think the score will be on Saturday?
No, I don't think this will be the weekend that it changes, unfortunately, for Bournemouth and Bournemouth fans. Score, let's go 4-0.
And that being said, who will the scorers be?
Erling Haaland. I'm going to go Erling Haaland.
Just for one?
No, Erling Haaland double. I fancy Jack Grealish to score.
Right, yeah.
I fancy Jack Grealish to score. And then I'll go Kevin De Bruyne as well. Why not?
Right, yes. And where will Man City finish in the league? I feel like you're going to say top, so I'll ask you another one as well. Will they finally win the Champions League this season?
I think they've got as good a chance as any to win the Champions League this season. We've already spoken about the impact Erling Haaland can have, and key will be keeping him fit. We know he scores goals in the Champions League for fun. He did so at Dortmund, and City, a far superior team to Dortmund. So, and in this team, he will get chances and chances and chances. So, I would have them, I think, at the early stage of the season as favourites for the Champions League. But it's such an unpredictable competition. No one envisaged Real Madrid winning it last season. So it's so hard to call. But I think if they're going to do it, then, look at their squad now. This is the year that they could do it.
Yeah. And more importantly, of course, where do you think Bournemouth will finish in the season? You can be as honest as you want.
No, well, I at The Athletic, we all had to kind of do our table predictions a couple of weeks ago, and I looked at it, and Bournemouth weren't making any signings, and Scott Parker was obviously making comments about not being best pleased about that. So I did tip them to go down, and I think, as I say, the way they stay up this season for me is if their strikers score goals. Beating Aston Villa surprised me. That's a really good step in the right direction, and that should give, in theory, Kiefer Moore plenty of confidence to, I can score in the Premier League, I'll carry on doing this. But if their strikers go cold for, a number of weeks, then you just worry where they pick up points from.
Perfect. Interesting answers as well. So I wonder how much you'd make if you took those predictions down to the bookies. However, that is all that we have time for today. Dan, thank you again for joining us today. You can check out his work on the Athletics website and follow Dan on Twitter, all of which the links will be in the description below. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe on this video for more AFC Bournemouth content, and tune in next week for another episode of the Cherries On Top podcast. Bye.